Welcome to Alpha Wolf Capital. I'm Tim, and I want to personally thank you for stopping by. This channel is designed to help small companies, both public and private, gain exposure with potential consumers, investors, even partners. Take, for example, today's guest, newly appointed CEO Arun Swaminathan with COYA Therapeutics. COYA Therapeutics is a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on developing proprietary new therapies to enhance the function of regulatory T cells. They are currently developing a multi-modality TREG therapies for neurodegenerative, autoimmune, and metabolic diseases. They have 4 diseases that they have targeted: ALS, dementia, which is personal to me, it's what I lost my father from, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. All of these are horrible diseases. And there is some real promise with the therapies that they are working on. But I'm going to let Arun tell you more about that in just a minute. This is not to be taken as investment advice. I am not a certified financial planner. This is for education and entertainment purposes only. I encourage everyone to do their own due diligence. Hey, everybody. Tim from Alpha Wolf Capital coming at you with a follow-up interview with a company that's had some exciting news recently and had some transitions too, because the last time, Arun, that I had you here, you were not the CEO of the company. Howard was the CEO, and now he's the chairman, and you have stepped into the CEO role, right?
That's correct, Tim. Yeah, absolutely. I just assumed the CEO role on 1st of November, so it's only been a few days. Exciting times. It was obviously Howard will be there as the executive chair. What Howard has done in growing and building, Howard's the founder, as you probably recall, growing and building COYA to where we are is just remarkable. He is fantastic. He's been a great guide and mentor for me. And I look forward as we move forward and do wonderful things in COYA, hopefully. I will have Howard by my side guiding me and supporting me. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Well, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And for those that haven't put the pieces together yet, because I didn't have your logo up, this is COYA Therapeutics, and the symbol is COYA. From the first time that I had you guys on, you had a nice run in the stock. I think the first time I had you on, it was trading in the 6 and change area. It went up to about, a little over 10, right? Yeah, a little over 10. And then you were awaiting some data, and we're gonna talk about that data in a minute. Prior to the data coming out, you also had a capital raise that was priced at what was that, 725 or so, I think it was, right?
Yes.
So you're sitting on, I think right now, about 31 million in cash after that raise. Is that right?
It is 31 million before the raise, Tim. So with the raise, we're closer to the 40 million. Yeah.
Okay. So, I can understand there being a little bit of pressure on the stock from the capital raise. However, you're positioned well with capital. And I think the thing that maybe we should highlight or focus on is maybe the misperception of the data that came out recently. Would you agree with that?
No, I 100% agree, Tim. Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about that. So.
Okay. So let's kind of just, I guess for those that are not familiar with the COYA Therapeutics story, let's give them a quick rundown of what COYA does, and then we can progress forward to the results.
Oh, sounds good. So at COYA, we are a neurodegenerative focused company. What that means is we focus on diseases that affect the neurons, essentially, right? So diseases like ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, diseases like frontotemporal dementia, which has recently been on the news because of some famous people being diagnosed with it. Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. What all of these diseases have in common, Tim, is that basically, in a layman's term, the neurons go wacky. I mean, they're not communicating with each other. I like to use a spark plug analogy for people who are old enough to remember carburetors in cars with spark plugs and motorbikes with spark plugs. When the sparks are not flying between the two, that spark doesn't go, then you start having stalling issues. The car doesn't start, the motorbike doesn't start, engine stalls. You have all these flooding problems, the carburetor floods, and eventually sometimes the machine doesn't start. So that's exactly what these neurological diseases are. The communication between the neurons get disrupted because the neurons are dying. And this is usually because of a process called neuroinflammation. It is like any other inflammation, except it's inflammation targeting the neurons, right? And we believe that fundamentally neuroinflammation is the way to address these diseases. And we do that by addressing something called the regulatory T cells, commonly in the scientific world referred to as Tregs. What we do is that we increase the function and numbers of these Tregs. When you do that, when you make these Tregs more functional, they tamp down neuroinflammation. So they prevent the neuronal diseases from progressing or prevent it from even happening. That is nature's job. That's exactly what Treg does in nature, is prevent most of us from getting these diseases by regulating all this stuff and keeping it in check. When it goes out of whack, that's when you start getting these diseases, and we bring it back into what it's supposed to do. That's kind of at a very fundamental level, the science of what we do. Happy to go in more detail. Our lead asset is a product called COYA 302, which is a combination of a low-dose interleukin-2. It's a recombinant human interleukin-2. What the recombinant human interleukin-2 does is it actually increases those things I just told you. It increases the function and numbers of Treg. But there's a critical element to this, and this is going to address the question about the Alzheimer's readout. Low-dose IL-2 is an interesting molecule. It has two sides of the same coin, seesaw, yin and yang, whatever analogy works best. I'll say that is what the low-dose IL-2 is. When low dose starts moving towards the high dose, it does the exact opposite. It starts making the Tregs dysfunctional. It makes the environment more inflammatory or pro-inflammatory. And that is useful in cancer. That's exactly where IL-2 is used in cancer. Because in cancer, you want to do the opposite. You actually want to kill these cells. And the way you're going to kill these cells is by making the environment inflammatory and so on. So that's the yin and yang seesaw of IL-2. I'll get to the Alzheimer's study, but what is important for people to remember that IL-2, as you keep increasing, will do exactly the opposite thing. So it kind of turns over. It does the flip-flop, if I may say. The flip-flop is not abrupt. It's a gradual flip-flop. So we want to keep the IL-2 at a low enough dose where it is doing what we want it to do, which is to improve the Treg function and numbers. I'll come to that again with the Alzheimer's data, but specifically back to ALS, COYA 302 also combines a product called CTLA4. What the CTLA4 does is it keeps these Tregs durable and increased suppressive function for longer. So, it kind of actually balances, it reduces the seesaw from being too much of a seesaw. So the CTLA4 actually works wonderfully well, and we've seen that it works in ALS patients. In a very small study, investigator-initiated, where the low-dose interleukin-2 and CTLA4 were administered in ALS patients for 1 year. Then we looked at the 6-month endpoint, which is the FDA endpoint, and there's a score called ALSFRS. I won't go too much into the score, but let's just say higher the number, better. Lower the number, the patient's doing bad. It goes from 0 to 48. And what we saw remarkably in that study, Tim, was that we stopped progression of ALS. ALS in 6 months didn't progress at all. Normally, if you didn't treat these patients, you would have expected them to have been down 6 to 8 points in that 6 months. And 6 to 8 points is the difference between, it's a dramatic difference. It's a difference between being able to walk and being on a wheelchair sometimes for patients. So it's not, if you put it in context of a patient's life, in 6 months, they can go from being able to walk to needing a wheelchair. And that's what happens with a lot of ALS patients. And then we continued the drug for 1 year. And it barely dropped. It dropped another by a point. It wasn't flat, but it dropped by a point. Again, if you look at what would normally happen to a patient, they would have dropped 12 to 14 points. That can be the difference between them being able to walk and being on a ventilator, which happens to ALS patients. And that's why the average lifespan of an ALS patient is only 2 to 3 years after diagnosis. A lot of them, it's a sad disease. It's a really sad disease. You deteriorate pretty fast. There are some patients that progress slower. Some patients progress even faster than the 2 years. And there's a mix of patients. There's people like Stephen Hawkins who lived with ALS for a long, long time. And then there were people like Lou Gehrig, who the disease is named after. He was called the Iron Horse because he, if I'm right, didn't miss a game for 3,000 some games. And then ALS happened and he declined so fast and passed away pretty quickly, right? So that's our main focus. That is our lead candidate. We're going to advance into a phase 2b study that can potentially be pivotal in 2025. And that one has a fast path because it is an orphan disease. The FDA is usually pretty open to approving as long as the data supports it. Sometimes even on one trial, there's precedence for that. Obviously, all that is going to be determined by the data. So that is our main focus. Right behind that is a related disease that manifests a little differently called frontotemporal dementia. I think in the news recently, Bruce Willis was diagnosed with it. I think 9 or 10 months ago, it was in the news a lot. That affects behavior. The frontotemporal part is what controls all of our behaviors. It is our filter system in a way. It keeps us from not doing some things that we might otherwise do and so on, risk assessments. And you see severe behavioral changes in some FTD patients. On some, you don't, but there's a combination of physical and mental. So that is the next disease we will be targeting because our mechanism should work there as well. It's the same underlying neuroinflammation. These two diseases are like a fire, like a forest fire that you got to put out. And we do that really well. But we also do well with diseases that are more simmering, like a simmering coal, that is Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. And we do that well as well, because they're all neuroinflammation. Some of them are burning, raging fires. Some of them are smoldering fires, but they're both pretty destructive at the end, which is why Alzheimer's progresses at a slower rate than ALS, but is equally devastating at the end, right? So that is the gist of what we're doing at COYA. We're very excited about it. On the Alzheimer's study that we just reported out, Tim, I think what was remarkable about that investigator study is the low dose IL-2 alone, it was only one of the components of our COYA 302, showed remarkable cognitive stability, meaning on one of the measures known as ADAS-Cog, which is all cognitive measurements. Every 4-week dose showed that it stopped cognitive decline. In fact, numerically, it increased slightly. And more importantly, the difference from the placebo group was almost a delta of 5, which any doctor will say is very clinically meaningful. We also saw things like, I'm not going to get technical, but biomarkers like A beta 42 increase in the spinal cord, in the cerebrospinal fluid. What that really means is when you see that increase, it means plaque is being removed from the brain in a simple manner. So we saw that the drug was safe, it was well tolerated, there were no serious adverse events. And it did what it was supposed to do, which is increase the Treg number and function. So everything lined up on that every 4-week dose, the every month dose for. So that was great. What confused the market, and I'm going to just get to it. And again, I want to say, when I say confuse the market, I've had conversations with 2 groups. One is the sophisticated biotech investor types that are PhDs and stuff. Of course, pharmaceutical company types that are also MDs and PhDs. They obviously understood the data because of this, what I've said before about the IL-2 science. IL-2 is a product that has this yin and yang seesaw. And I think we didn't maybe do an effective enough job of simply communicating that when we release this data, and that's a lesson learned for us as well. But I think that was a root cause of the confusion, because we also had a dose which was given every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks actually means it's a higher dose, because now we're giving something every 2 weeks instead of every 4 weeks. So it was actually double the exposure or double the dose. So for us, it was not surprising. We actually wanted to answer that question: how far can we push the IL-2 before it starts seesawing? I think we got our answer. It can't go more than that. We found that every 2 weeks the seesaw is already starting to tilt, and we don't want that. We want the seesaw to stay down, weighted down, right? So that is the once a month. And once a month is the previous study we did that was done by the same investigators in eight patients, a very small study. Once a month showed again in that study that cognitive function stabilized, improved. So now we know that with low-dose IL-2 alone, once a month is the dose. And the purpose of these studies, they're called dose-finding studies for a reason. It is to find the right dose, and we found it.
I can't see that. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm saying to myself, well, as a patient, if I only have to take it once a month as opposed to twice a month, that's a positive, right? So
I agree with you. Yeah.
it's gonna cost me less because I'm not gonna have to take as much, right?
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic news, right?
Well, we did too, but I think you asked me about, you hit it right on the head and said there was some confusion in the market, and I am going to take full responsibility that there was confusion in the market, and we can say the market's wrong. It probably also means we could have more simply explained it, which we're doing now, which maybe we could have done proactively better. Yeah, exactly. So I think when people hear it, they get it. But it's not something we could have expected people to organically pick up, right? Usually people think higher is better. Higher is not always better. And here's an example of that. So,
And not only that, but so, I think one of the biggest concerns is always safety, right?
Mhm.
When you're going through these drug trials. So the safety profile was fine. You had no issues there at all, right?
Yeah, it was clean. Yeah.
So that's a very positive thing. As you explain it, and you're saying, okay, sometimes maybe people are looking for the cure, and disappointed by the fact that it just didn't decline more. But I can tell you from someone that has experienced losing my father to dementia, decline when it happens, I'm going to tell you right now, is if I wish that this would have been available for my father, because he declined. I mean, literally, I talked to him every week on the phone. And after he got diagnosed, I think I was able to continue talking to him on the phone for about 2 months. And then it got so bad that we could not talk because I didn't know what he was saying. He was making up words.
Yeah.
Didn't know. I mean, he couldn't complete a sentence. And it was so shocking to me how fast he declined that, it was brutal. It's a brutal, painful disease for everyone involved.
Everyone. That's the key point. Not just the patient, the caregivers, the friends, the family. It is tough on everybody. This is not a disease, right? I mean, exactly.
And it's not like you got 2 months to live. I mean, he was still there. He is there, but it's not him. It's the shell of him. but it being literally nowhere near the man that I knew for all of my life. And that is a tough thing to watch, go on for another year, year and a half. But that year and a half could have been very, very different if your drug was out and it stopped that rapid decline, right? If it would have been caught early.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think that's the key. And, that's one thing at COYA too, Tim, is we are passionate about this. Howard founded this company because his father was had dementia and passed away a few years ago. And he's publicly stated this, so I'm not saying anything inappropriate here. Same thing with, we have an individual by the name of Daniel Berman, and again, he has publicly disclosed these things. He carries the gene for potentially for ALS, for FTD. So we have a lot of personally motivated people in COYA. I have family members that are affected by Alzheimer's. We have other people in our company that have very personal stories around some of these diseases, and that's why we're a passionate group. We get a lot done. We're very committed to moving these therapies forward. Obviously, we will do what is right. We got to make sure first and foremost that patients are safe. So we work with the FDA, we work with the other regulatory authorities to follow the guidelines and get these trials in a safe manner to patients. At the end of it, this is all about the patients, right? If you got to put the patient in the center of everything we do, and we do, and we live that at COYA. So
On a scale of 1 to 10, of what your hopes would have been for the outcome of this phase of the study, how on a scale of that 1 to 10, 10 being best, what would you rate the results of this study?
Yeah, I know, and I'm not saying it because I'm now the CEO of the company. I actually would give it a 10, and here's why. Because we were remarkably surprised that at 5 months we saw this much of a separation in cognition, in the biomarkers, in everything. Typically, Alzheimer's drugs, if you look at history, take about 18 months before you start seeing those kinds of separation. So that is very promising for us. And the reason I would again say 10 is not just based on this study alone, but this study gives us confidence that our outcomes with COYA 302, which is a combination, and I explained to you before that by adding that CTLA4, we can actually stabilize that seesaw a little better so it doesn't swing that quickly, right? And that goes a long way with durability and efficacy. It has increased our confidence in our COYA 302 program, which is a combination program, and the potential positive outcomes that could happen with ALS and FTD. So for me, that all makes this a very successful study for COYA because it answered the questions we wanted answered, including the line beyond which we can push IL-2, which is an important part of clinical trials. The whole point of a clinical trial is to know where the lines and boundaries are, and I think we're figuring that out. And so to me, it was a very successful study because it's giving us a lot of hope in what we could do in the future with not only Alzheimer's disease, but with other diseases. And you pointed out that our safety profile was relatively clean. That means that it also allows us to combine with other agents in Alzheimer's disease, and together with them, maybe we can, 2+1+1, maybe it could be 3, right? And we can do something to optimize those combinations. And from a business perspective, it also, I think, really opens the door for us in 2025 for some value-creating strategic partnerships. Partnerships with pharma companies, maybe additional non-dilutive foundational grants. I mean, this investigator trial was funded by the Gates Foundation, by the Alzheimer's Association. So, that is the kind of stuff, the door is now wider open. I mean, it's for us to pursue those opportunities in 2025. And I fully intend to make that a strong priority for us, which is to really see how we can leverage some of those strategic partnerships to help us support moving forward our programs using non-dilutive money. So that's more the business nice of this data. I mean, I focus initially more on what's nice about it from a patient perspective, but it's also from us.
Didn't you have I mean, you had a pretty clear runway or a path to financing with, yeah, I thought you had, didn't you have something in place with I'm trying to remember who the heck.
Dr. Reddy's, yeah.
Yes.
So we have a $700 million deal with Dr. Reddy's. Thank you for reminding me of that, Tim. So they have the rights to market ALS only the ALS indication in most of the major markets. That includes United States. It excludes Japan, South America, Mexico, where we think we can in the future create more value, especially Japan. But in exchange for that, they gave us upfront money. The money also funds our trial, the ALS trial. We will receive another 8.4 million, and all this is non-dilutive, just to be clear. We will receive 8.4 million in 2025 when we start this ALS trial. That's part of our milestones with them. We also have line of sight another 40 million in milestones between then and the product actually becoming commercial. And once a product becomes commercial, we are eligible for mid-teen royalties. And ALS market, if you use the last product that launched, Relyvrio, as a benchmark, they made, if I'm right, about 600 million within the first year of launch in the US alone. So this is a $2 to $3 billion global market in base case. So you can do the math on the kinds of the royalties that'll come into COYA when that event happens. And in addition to that, we have other sales milestones adding up to 650 million. So if everything goes well, which we believe it will, and COYA 302 is on the market someday, when it is on the market, we'll be in a great position for a small biotech where we are getting steady non-dilutive money coming in through that partnership. And we have only given away one indication. We still have the ability to partner combination of this low dose IL-2 with other companies, potentially even find partners for COYA 302 in other indications, or move it forward ourselves. What I can promise is we will do what we think is the best for value creation, meaning if we believe that we can create more value by keeping it ourselves, we will. If we believe there is strength in numbers and we can create more value with a strategic partner, not only financially, but because the strategic partner, Tim, brings other things to the table, like their ability to understand regulatory pathways better than us, their ability and resources, which we are seeing with Dr. Reddy's, that we can get a lot of support from them on certain resources. They know manufacturing. They're better at manufacturing than we are. So there are synergies and partnerships that can help bring a drug to the market faster and also be more cost effective and so on. So we will look at all the options as we move forward. But I feel pretty optimistic about where we are with this data, that we can strike some significant strategic partnerships.
So let me phrase this question, I guess maybe if since the data has come out, and like you said, there's some confusion on the retail part, but people that are in the industry and the people that understand the impact that this trial has shown, have you seen maybe a pickup in some of those conversations with some of those potential partners?
I mean, I have to be cautious what I say about those, but the short answer is yes, of course. I mean, we are advancing those conversations. There's definitely interest in the data. People understand that combination potential makes sense scientifically. So yes, that is why I'm saying what I'm saying. I wouldn't say that if I didn't think that we're getting positive feedback from the.
I just want to make sure be clear. I try to make everything so simple.
We're not sitting in a bubble and thinking this is all great. No, we are getting a lot of external validation that is good, and this is something that can really move things forward. But we'll continue to have those conversations, and I think as more people hear our story, they also start to understand the value better.
I mean, we're coming into the year end, and I don't know that there's, I mean, people are aligning themselves and trying to figure out how they're gonna attack next year when their portfolios or whatever. We've got to get through. Well, this happens to be a pretty big. Well, I was going to say something, but I'm going to not say it. This is an interesting time that I think if this is a time that, and I want to bring up the chart so that people understand what I'm talking about. I'm going to move this out of the way for a second, and then I'm going to back this chart up. So this is it's a really, I got to tell you, actually, it's a big cup. There's a big cup going on with that formation. And what's interesting about the pattern, let me back this out even more. I mean, even though you see these big dips and ups, the overall trend is still from the lower left to the upper right. Okay. Now you extend it away a couple of times from that trend line. And anytime that happens, it's normal to have the price come back and contract and try and stay in that steady lane of just climbing higher, right? So you haven't done any, I mean, this recent pullback has not changed that long-term direction that the company is heading in. It's still on an upward trajectory. So what it's doing though is it's coming down to this area where there's some congestion. There's some memory at this price level, right where it sits. I mean, it's not an accident that this is hanging out right where it's at, because that's a level that it's found either resistance or support at before. So here it's acting as support. Now, I don't know what's going to happen coming into the end of the year. I don't know how people are going to do tax loss selling or whatever.
Yeah.
But for right now, this is just, the stock kind of deciding, okay, is this the level where we're going to hang out for a little bit until the next catalyst comes out? Now, some may think that there is no catalyst because, well, the data's out. You don't have any other, data that's going to be hitting before the end of the year. But we just talked about the fact that there are conversations that are going on. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to find the perfect partner and announce that before the end of the year, right? And I would imagine that, you're going to be very selective that you find the right dance partners, right? I mean,
that is a very important point, Tim. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah. So to think that there isn't anything that could be a catalyst, I think it would be an inaccurate assumption. And I think that knowing that there are, at least within the medical community that understands what this data really means, there's absolutely potential for some kind of a catalyst, a significant catalyst for that matter. You're well positioned with cash. You don't need to do another raise, right?
Correct.
The raise that you did was participated by insiders, right?
Mostly by current investors. Yeah.
Okay. And then how many shares do you have outstanding fully diluted?
I believe it's approximately 16.7 million, Tim.
Okay, so 16.7 million, which is nothing. I mean, that is not a bloated share count. That is like nothing, right? So I would say that fiscally, fundamentally, the company is positioned well. What Now, and we just said there may not be any, there is no data, at least that's going to be coming out, new data before the end of the year. 2025 is your big year, right? I mean, you're going to have a lot of potential catalysts in 2025. Would you agree with that?
And 2025 is a big year. We're going to have Alzheimer's. This data, there's more data from this study that'll come out that'll hopefully further strengthen our story. We'll have the ALS trial started. Soon after that, we should be filing for approval to start the FTD trial. So there's a lot happening in 2025. And like you said, well, we could have, hope, maybe we'll have some non-dilutive strategic deals as well. Of course, one can never guide to something like that, but that's certainly a possibility, and we will be vigorously pursuing those. And then we have these combinations with GLP-1s. So we will have more preclinical data on that. They'll be preclinical, but the potential with GLP-1s are these, of course, I'm sure you know these big obesity drugs, but they have potential in neurodegenerative diseases and other diseases as well. And we have filed IP combining low-dose IL-2, our COYA 301, with GLP-1s. We have not shared the data publicly yet because we are solidifying our intellectual property, obviously, but we will sometime next year share that. And that's the kind of data that can propel us as well, because although it's early data, the potential is immense for some combination like that. So,
Right. So I would say you're sitting in a pretty good position, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
As you head into 2025, I would say you're probably feeling pretty good as the CEO of COYA Therapeutics.
I feel great as the CEO of COYA Therapeutics. Of course, I am lucky and fortunate that I'm, coming into a role where Howard has already set me up well. So, I owe a lot of credit to the team, to Howard, and this team is a spectacular team at COYA. I mean, they drive hard, they are compassionate, but they also are systematic. So we do the right things, and we get where we follow the regulatory guidances, we follow everything, and so we work well and we move things forward. So yeah, I feel very good about and fortunate to be the CEO of this wonderful company.
And I think this is one that look, if you know anybody that suffers from ALS or anybody that's suffering from dementia or Parkinson's or any of these things, right? That this is a company that you want to keep an eye on. I mean, this is a company you should go to their investor portion of their website and sign up for their investor alerts. That way you keep updated on. And I'm saying that you don't have to be an investor to just keep an eye on what's happening with the progression of their drugs that I think could have a very meaningful impact on a lot of lives, right? Quality of life for, like I said, I wish that this was around when my dad was around, right? I may have been able to have more great conversations with him that I got robbed of, right? So I mean, it's this could be really impactful for a lot of people, right? And it's a team that is passionate and cares about and is fundamentally in a great position. What's your cash burn? I mean, your cash burn is probably going to go up next year, right? Because you're going to have, or no?
Yes and no. Yeah, I mean, obviously the clinical trials, but that's baked in. We have previously guided that our cash will take us to 2026. That was before the PIPE, before the 10 million raise. So you can extrapolate, we will get much later into 2026. And then remember, we also get non-dilutive milestone payment next year of 8.4 million. So we're feeling pretty good about getting through the end of the ALS trial and those milestones with the cash we have. And we'll hopefully likely supplement it with some additional non-dilutive money. No guarantees, but I'm really hoping we could. So
Right. I mean, I would be pretty shocked if that, at the halfway point throughout 2025, if you haven't announced a couple, one or two more uh collaborations or partnerships, right?
I hope you're right, Tim, and we are definitely, we're definitely, that's part of our strategy. So, yeah.
Right. All right. Listen, so what do you think? We'll have you come back when I guess the next significant event happens, right? Whatever that may be.
No, that sounds good, Tim, and I really appreciate you taking the time to invite me on your show. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, I enjoy it, and like I said, anybody that is watching or interested in this story, I think personally, this is a very interesting place to potentially, if you're not in the stock, to take a starter position. Now, I'm not telling anybody to buy the stock. That's not what I do. All I do is present what I think is a very compelling story and a company that can have a very positive impact on humanity. So at this level, 650, there is some price support there. The next level down where there would be more support would be at the $6 range, which is is a psychological round number. But I mean, in this range, getting started with the starter position, I don't think you could get hurt too badly. And I mean, even if the stock does pull back, I don't think that the company is going to disappear. And the bottom line is, right now, it is in an upward trend. So this is kind of like a gift before Christmas, right? It comes back. This is a little gift to be able to get in the price where you just did the raise with a bunch of insiders was $7.25, right?
Correct.
So you'd be buying better than the insiders that just did that raise. So something to think about there. All right, Arun, I can't wait to have you back. I can't wait to see the progress that you guys make. And I want to thank you. Congratulations again on the CEO. I think you fully deserve that title. And folks, when you get a chance, make sure you go to the website, look up investor relations or press releases, and take a look at the letter from two shareholders from Arun. Very informative. I think you'll like what you see. Hope you enjoyed today's interview with Arun Swaminathan from COYA Therapeutics. If you did enjoy today's video, do us a favor. Give us a like. How about giving us a share? And while you're at it, make sure you smash that subscribe button. All of those things are very important to us here at Alpha Wolf Capital, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Capital wishes you the very best of success.